Hi there, Telebait here, and after the Go Hard nerfs, I'm going to be going over what I think the new top deck is, which is Lee Sin One Turn Kill. And this deck is one of the very few combo decks in Legends of Runeterra, which you often don't see a lot of, really. And it's all in on one win condition, which is Lee Sin, and the idea is that you give him Overwhelm with Zenith Blade, and then use things like gems from Mountain Goat and Mentor of the Stones to buff him up, and you kill your opponent in one turn using Lee Sin's leveled up effect. And because the deck is all in on the Lee Sin strategy, it runs a lot of different ways to protect him. So things like Guiding Touch, Nopify, Sunblessed Vigor, Bastion, Denies, Concussive Palms, and a lot of cheap spells, so you can use Lee Sin's effect to give him a barrier whenever you need it to protect him. And the old version of this deck did actually run Zed, but the new version now runs Zoe, and she's just found to be a great inclusion to this deck because she works really well as an alternative win condition and forces removal to be used on her instead of Lee Sin. And additionally to that, every time she strikes the Nexus, she generates a spell, so that can help you level up Lee Sin even faster. And finally, to help out against aggressive decks, or just to help you stall out until you draw your combo pieces, you have cards like Eye of the Dragon, Sparklefly, and Concussive Palm, and the purpose of these is just slow your opponent down, use lifesteal effects to heal you up, and stall out until you get to your win condition. For the mulligan with this deck, against aggressive decks such as Scouts, I usually go for early units and focus on staying alive. So these will be things like Zoe, Eye of the Dragon, Mountain Goat, and Sparklefly. Against slower decks such as the Mirror or Draven Ez, you want to see Zoe and pretty much Lee Sin, and that's about it. You hard mulligan for Lee Sin. If you already got a Lee Sin, I will also keep Zenith Blade in hand, but literally all you're looking for against control matchups is Lee Sin. Before we get into some games, if you enjoy the deck and find the video helpful, please leave a like, and subscribe if you want to see more Runeterra decks and guides. Also, follow me on Twitter if you want to see up-to-date deck lists, as I make and tweak them. I put a link in the description below. So for this first game, we're up against an Invoke list, and this is one using Zoe and Leona. Usually they use A-Soul, and I prefer the version with A-Soul for the big endgame win condition. The main thing is we just need to make sure we protect Lee Sin from various removal cards, so the things we need to be concerned about are Hush and any comets or supernovas he gets. We've got a pretty good starting hand here with Lee as well. Because we've got Lee, we don't need to mulligan for him, and it's worth keeping Zoe and Mountain Goat as well. I'll throw away Deep Meditation looking for something like Zenith Blade, which is another key combo piece we need. Turn 1, we definitely play Zoe here. He plays one of his own, and I choose to attack it, and I think this could be a small mistake here. Because we have the Sunblessed Vigor in hand, we could use that to get a good trade with our Zoe. And also, if he has another Zoe in hand, he can then play it. And there is the second Zoe, so I definitely think the Sunblessed Vigor play is the better line. In the position we're in now, we might as well just play Mountain Goat, because there's nothing else we can really do. Turn 3, we can't play any more units, so we might as well open attack. You always open attack if your opponent can have potentially stronger development than you. And because we have no development whatsoever, he's definitely going to have potentially stronger than us, so we might as well open attack. He plays Grand Plaza, and unfortunately we can't really do anything, so we're just going to have to sit here and take it. We get another Zoe here, which is great. We just need to be careful about the Challenger effects from Grand Plaza, so we should wait until after he's attacked to play our Zoe here.
Daylight warms the heart and lights the way. My spirit shines.
So here I'm using the Sunblessed Vigor just to protect the goat. I might as well. There's no real downside in doing it. This actually gets out a Hush, which is insane. Hush is a really important card for him in this matchup, and he needs to use it to deny our Lee Sin when our Lee Sin gets leveled and buffed. But he's used it on a goat here, which is really insane. We can just use Pale Cascade here as well for some great value, keeping our goat alive, getting a draw, and then we can play Zoe afterwards. And I use the gem here, and I think that's a mistake. There's no real reason to use the gem. He doesn't have any 1 damage pings. The only 1 damage attack he could do is something like single combat Zoe into us, but we'd be happy if he did that anyway. So I don't really understand the purpose behind using the gem here, and it's probably better to use on Lee Sin. That way you can go for the big 1-turn kill later on. And my general rule with gems is you never want to use gems unless you have to, or if you're going to burn spell mana. but I had 2 mana here, so I wasn't at risk of burning mana, so I shouldn't have used the gem really. It's a small misplay, but can make the difference in some games. Get another Zoe here, which is quite good. One thing to note is he did use a Priestess earlier, so he does have a chance of something like Falling Comet. He doesn't have enough mana to use it this turn, but if he used it next turn on my Lee Sin, I have no deny to protect him. I could use something like Bastion, but if he has another Hush in hand, and given how easily he used his last Hush, he may very well have another Hush in hand. So because of that, I think playing Lee Sin here is a risk, just because I don't have the right tools to defend him in my hand. And because of that, it just makes sense to open attack, because again, if I'm not playing Lee Sin, I don't have any development, so any possible development he does could be stronger. He trades in his Zoe here, which is really unusual. I feel like that was a bad play, but I'm very happy with it. And he plays his Scryer, which isn't a big deal. It is something we need to deal with at some point. The options we have here are to play Zoe, but again, if we play Zoe, he's going to be killed by a Challenger unit on his attack. So Deep Meditation's the sensible play here, making the use out of it while it has the discounted cost. I have the dragons okay here, probably not really needed. So he plays Twin Sisters here, which means we know he didn't get Comet from the Priestess. He did get another Invoke off the Scryer, so there is still risk of an Obliterate card. Options here are very difficult, so if we don't play anything, we're going to be taking a lot of damage to our Nexus, which I don't really like here. If we play Lee Sin, we don't have a decent way to give him a barrier, so we would have to commit something like a Concussive Palm to protect him. We could use Bastion, but that would leave him on 1 health, and then he could be vulnerable to things like Concerted Strike and Single Combat. So I'm not really a big fan of using Bastion. If we play Lee Sin, we definitely have to go with Concussive Palm then. And the other options to play are pretty weak. The only other real sensible option here is to straight up play Concussive Palm. And there's not really a difference between playing Lee Sin and using Concussive Palm, or using Concussive Palm and then playing Lee Sin afterwards. We've got the deny now going into next turn, so I definitely want to play Lee Sin while I can, because we have the tools to protect him in case he's got any of his Obliterate cards. So he played the Serpent here, which is definitely a misplay on his behalf, because that gives me the chance to play a gem. And I should have definitely played the gem, that way I can use Guiding Touch on my Nexus, and that will give Lee Sin the barrier, and I don't need to commit the Concussive Palm this turn. I must have just tunnel visioned on the Concussive Palm plan, but it still works out okay. The big difference here between the two choices is his Elusive is still live, and I don't have Concussive Palm if he goes for another Challenger on my Lee Sin next turn. So definitely a poor decision there, and I should have gone with the gem while he gave me the opportunity. This turn I play Zoe, and he plays another Zoe, so that's 3 Zoes each, is it? I think. It's crazy that we drew all our Zoes. So now it's just a case of keeping up enough mana to protect Lee Sin, because he still could have something like Comet. So we want to keep 4 mana up, but also starting to progress Lee Sin's level up. And here I want to be able to kill his 4/3 Elusive with my attack. However, there's a big risk of if he does something like Hush plus Pale Cascade, I wouldn't be able to keep Lee Sin alive, because Lee has 5 health, so even if I committed something like Bastion, it wouldn't be enough. So I have to pull in one of the 2 attack units, because this deck is so reliant on Lee Sin, you just cannot risk your Lee Sin dying. So even what's probably a really safe play, because he's already used 1 Hush, so I don't think it's that likely he's got Hush and Pale Cascade, but it's just any chance that could happen is just not worthwhile. His Elusive unit isn't that big a threat, and I can play cards like I have the Dragon to help heal me up in the future rounds, so it's not a big deal that I let his Elusive live. And he commits Star Shape in here, so he can no longer do anything which kills Lee Sin. The only thing is Single Combat, but neither of his units have enough damage to kill Lee with Single Combat, so we're okay. And I just play the Dragons here to get the Dragon Ins next turn to use as blockers if he plays any more units.
Shining gifts from the sky.
Plays another Mountain Scry. At this point, most of his hand has to be Celestial cards, so we really need to keep that Deny mana up. And it's pretty much how you play this deck. All you do, play Lee Sin, make sure you always have 4 mana, and you're good. Here, because I don't want to waste any mana, I'm playing Bastion, and it's just because burning 8 mana here would be way too much.
Radiant strikes.
So he goes, kills my Zoe and my Eye of the Dragon here, but we're fairly good. And here we want to use Guardian Touch just to make sure we generate a Dragon next turn, and we get Zenith Blade. And I think this is the game here. So if we play Zenith Blade this turn, then we can use Sonic Wave, Resonating Strike into the next turn to give Lee Sin 10 attack with Overwhelm, and he's got a Spell Shield. So I believe the only counter he can have to this is double Hush, and he's already played 1 Hush, so he would have had to have drawn all 3 Hushes. I'm pretty sure we've got the game here.
What is gained when you return malevolence?
And I just give the Dragling Challenger just in case he does have the double Hush get out. And again, I'm going for both of his elusive units here, because if he somehow manages to live this turn, I want to reduce his number of threats next turn.
Prepare yourself.
And he doesn't have the answers here, so that's GG, and that's a perfect kill with Lee Sin. 20 damage exactly. And yeah, the deck is just really, really strong.
Ionia endures.
Okay, so going into our next game, we're up against Ezreal Draven, another very popular meta deck here. And our hand here is really good. We've got Lee Sin and Zenith Blade and a Deny. I'm tempted to keep all 3. The only way we lose with this hand here is if we get blown out by an aggro start. So it is somewhat tempting not to keep the Deny and try and look for some of our early units to fight for the board early on. But then you run the risk of what if you don't draw the Deny later. So I think keeping Deny, Lee Sin, Zenith Blade is the best call here. We get another Lee Sin, which isn't the worst, isn't the best, and we get another Zenith Blade. We've got all the combo pieces we need, but we don't have anything else, so it's not the best. Sparklefly turn 2, that is absolutely great hit and exactly what we needed. He could have something to kill it, but we want him to use a lot of removal onto our other cards here. And I choose not to play the Sparklefly, and that's probably a small mistake. He could use something like Mystic Shot or Thermo Beam to kill it, but if he's using those cards on Sparklefly, I'm completely happy with that. And now we draw the Mountain Goat. We can't play both this turn, which is a pretty rough position. Between playing the 2, I'd rather play the Mountain Goat here, just because his effect matters more on the board. As in, he can generate the gems, whereas Sparklefly gets lifesteal and we're at full health, so it doesn't really matter. So Mountain Goat's the better play here. And he plays Draven, and we're quite happy to attack into that. His deck doesn't run anything which can buff HP, so we know he cannot block with the Draven. And the Noxus Piltover does have some weaknesses in their region combination, in that they don't run any healing, and they don't run any buffs to HP. So you need to really abuse those weaknesses, because they have a lot of strengths in other areas, especially doing direct damage to your Nexus. So we survived the early game. We've got Deny and Bastion in hand, plus Lee Sin and Zenith Blade ×2. So we're pretty good here. I'll be very surprised if we lose this. And here we just play the Sparklefly down. There's no reason not to. And he attacks in with both units, which is a great trade for our Mountain Goat, so we might as well. And he uses the Mystic Shot, which is strange. Like, why would you not commit it before the attack if you were going to do that anyway? Like, that's definitely a misplay from him. Like, it makes absolutely no sense. I just got extra value out of my Mountain Goat being able to block that. And here I'm using gems just to be mana efficient. There is some temptation to use Zenith Blade on Sparklefly, but if he has another Mystic Shot, it would be really bad for us. So here the big question is, can we get away with playing Lee Sin? If he has any damage card plus something like Ravenous Flock, or Scorched Earth, he will kill Lee Sin. So there is absolutely no way we can play the Lee Sin here until he's burnt some of his mana. And again, because we're not developing, we might as well open attack. He stops to think about something, which could suggest he has another Mystic Shot, but also at this sort of level of play, people have kind of wised up to the fact that you need to just, even if you don't have the answer, just stand there and think like you have the answer. And he plays Ezreal here, which isn't that big a threat. We've got Sparklefly to block him, so we're okay. And he's down to 4 mana here. So something like Mystic Shot plus Ravenous Flock can still kill Lee, but he can't do Mystic Shot plus Scorched Earth. And because we've got 2 Lees, the tempo advantage we gain here is huge. Otherwise, we'll be burning 5 mana. So only because I've got 2 Lees here do I think it's okay to play the Lee Sin. Tri-Beam comes out, and he gets Stargazer, so that's actually really good for us. Like, Stargazer is completely useless for him. Now we're in a position where we could be taking a lot of damage the next turn.
Time to return.
So he attacks in, and if we block with Lee, we would have to use 2 spells to proc his barrier, and then he could still use something to break the barrier and give damage on Lee. And the big thing we want to avoid here is Lee get taken damage, because as soon as he's damaged, things like Ravenous Flock can hit him, and he can use things like Scorched Earth, which would be quite bad for us. We could counter them by using something like Deny on them, but at this point, we're not taking too much damage that it's really threatening. And he uses Mystic Shot here, and at this point, I think we commit the Bastion, because we don't want him to be taking any damage. And he uses the Static Shock here, and I could commit Lee Sin's Sonic Wave, but again the same argument stands of, is it worth the tempo? Because then he has to use the Scorched Earth or Ravenous Flock to kill my Lee Sin, and I can just play another Lee Sin next turn. I actually think the best play is to let this go through as if and take the damage to my Lee Sin. Then we can use things like Deny to protect my Lee Sin next turn. But I decide to commit the Lee Sin's Sonic Wave to give it barrier, and that way my Lee Sin doesn't take any damage. And I don't think that's actually the best play here. I don't commit the Sonic Wave part just because the banked 1 mana is better. And I draw another Lee Sin here, which is incredibly lucky and exactly what we needed to see, to be honest. So here we can commit the Zenith Blade onto Lee Sin and still have enough mana for Deny for anything like Thermo Beam. So I'm fairly happy doing that. So he commits a Tri-Beam. This is a great Deny target for us. And the best thing about this is it gives my Lee Sin barrier as well. And so Ezreal is definitely the biggest threat on his side, so that's the one I want to hook. I'm not attacking in with Mountain Goat just because he gets a good block with his Stargazer, so I'd much rather use Mountain Goat as a blocker next round. And he commits Draven's Whirling Death here to do 1 damage to my Lee Sin and put it in that crucial damage state. Because of that, he could potentially kill my Lee Sin next round, but I've got another one in hand, so I'm in a fairly good position. Eye of the Dragon here is great. Our health is starting to get a bit low. One thing to be worried about is potentially Farron here, but if you play something like Farron, we can use Zenith Blade plus Sonic Wave to get our Lee Sin up to 8 health and with barrier, so that way we can use it to block Farron and we won't be at threat of dying. He goes for the open attack here, and because our Lee Sin's already damaged here, and we really don't want to be going against 2 health where things like Mystic Shot can kill us, I have to block with the Lee Sin here. The big question is, what do I block and do I commit the barrier? Because he almost definitely has a way of killing my Lee Sin, such as Scorched Earth or Ravenous Flock, it's probably slightly better to block the Stargazer. That way, if he uses Flock, my Lee Sin will still kill his Stargazer. However, if I block the Draven, which I do here, when he uses Ravenous Flock, the Draven won't die from me blocking it because it's got quick attack. There is the question of, do we commit something to give Lee Sin barrier here, or do we even use Deny? The problem with Deny is you're trading 4 mana for 1 mana, and if he's got another Flock in hand, it's pretty bad, or something like a Scorched Earth. It's really, really bad for us. So at this point, I think we just take the trade and play another Lee Sin. So I play Eye of the Dragon first here, and I think this is a mistake, because when I play Lee Sin next, I'll be down to 3 mana, which doesn't give me enough mana to protect him from something like a Thermobeam. So I should have just straight up played Lee Sin and not played Eye of the Dragon to keep 4 mana up. This is definitely a misplay here, and if he had Thermobeam, he would beat us. He passes back, luckily, so that means he doesn't do it, and I commit the Zenith Blade here. Because here we're just looking to buff up Lee's attack as much as possible. And here, Zenith Blade plus Gem will give Lee Sin the ability to kill. And we still have enough mana for Deny here, which means anything he could potentially do to try and disrupt Lee Sin will not work. So we should have the game here. So he levels up, goes to 7 attack, which is just enough to kill our opponent here. And I'm hooking in Stargazer in case he's got something like Get Excited, which he could use to kill his own unit, and that way he could live a bit longer. And with the barrier up here, I don't think there's any way he can kill it. And he surrenders, so that's GG. So some misplays in these games, but overall shows you the idea that you really just want to focus around protecting Lee Sin, and you're all in on that Lee Sin win condition. And in my opinion, this is probably the strongest deck in the meta at the moment. If you found the video helpful, please leave a like. I release guides like these every week, so subscribe if you want to see more Legends of Runeterra content like this. Until next time, thanks for watching and have a good day.